Hey everyone, Jack here, TalkNorwichCity. Welcome back to another video. This feels like a really big week in Norwich City's new era. A fairly unsuccessful new era, but a new era nonetheless. Mark Atanasio will be live on BBC Radio Norfolk taking a special Canary call on Wednesday, the 29th of October. That's going to be fascinating listening. And we also have a game against Hull, early kickoff on the telly on Saturday. Now, there are protests organised, various ones. And what's also pretty much confirmed is that Liam Manning will be the head coach against Hull this weekend. That comes off the back of a Sky report followed up by Connor Southwell of the Pink, and who said Norwich City have confirmed that head coach Liam Manning will speak to the media at 2 p.m. on Friday, and that's notable, ahead of Saturday's game against Hull City at Carrow Road. Now, it's worth noting here, the timeline of match days usually, if Norwich are playing on a Saturday at 3 o'clock, Liam Manning will often speak to the press on the Wednesday, which is early. You would usually assume that that comes on a Thursday. The fact that this is fairly late on a Friday and the game is early on the Saturday, in my cynical nature, suggests that that just squeezes the amount of time that the press can cover between press conference and match. It also means that Liam Manning is speaking post Atanasio interview with BBC Radio Norfolk. Now, there is a lot going on here, and it's difficult not to get too emotional about it. This here, City backing Liam Manning doesn't surprise me. Now, this visit from the Atanasios has been planned. It wasn't a reactive trip. This has been planned. Granted, the timescales may have shifted slightly due to the Brewers' unsuccessful campaign in the World Series or whatever it is. So there's a quiet period there. It means that they were able to come over. They've obviously got the AGM, which I think is usually December time. So they'll be over for that, one would assume. But this was never, I don't think, going to be a trip where big decisions would be made. I suspect that this is more of a fact-finding mission. This is more of a sensing the sentiment on the ground. It's easy to kind of feel, well, it's difficult, I think, actually, to feel what's really going on online, because sometimes that feels skewed and sometimes that isn't a realistic take on things. It's easy to, get caught in an echo chamber on Twitter or message boards or Facebook, wherever it may be. What's it actually feeling like on the ground at Carrow Road? Well, I don't think the owners will be at the game on Saturday, but they will get an opportunity to speak to fans, and I include Rob Butler and Phil Daly, and I think Chris will be there as well, Chris Reeve, on Wednesday. They will hear the voices of Norwich City fans on that very phone-in, and I think that's important. And should decisions be made off the back of how fans are feeling? No. We are always going to be reactive, and often we're wrong, but it is important, because if you keep muting out fans and giving across the impression that we're not being taken on a journey, then that will lead to season tickets not being renewed. All in all, no real buy-in from the fans. Now, for me, I want to hear a couple of things from Mark Atanasio on BBC Radio Norfolk. Now, it's clear that they will be sticking with Liam Manning, and I said that on previous videos. I said that I think he'll get definitely until that Leicester game on the 8th of November, because you've then got an international break. I want to hear a few things. We're already in the relegation zone and we are quickly being cut adrift. At what point does this become too late, untenable? For me, that's happened already. Norwich shouldn't be in the relegation zone. I can't see us beating Hull. I think we lose to Sheffield Wednesday, and I think we lose to Leicester, which means we will have gone 7-8 games in a row losing. That is a realistic and I think very real possibility that happens. Can you see us beating Hull or Sheffield Wednesday or Leicester based on current performances? Nothing has changed. Norwich City are only regressing. So at that point, there is a genuine chance that we are cut adrift from safety in the Championship. Does that become too late? And the other thing I want to hear is, if you're backing Manning and you're backing Napper and you're backing Webber, then why? What is the reason for that? Is it something in the data? Is it we're unfortunate in certain areas that we can't see? What is the the thinking behind that this will shift, because if you're backing Liam Manning, you are assuming that things will change. And I can't see a way that this changes. I don't think anyone watching Norwich City can see a world where this changes. You might get the odd result here and there, but can you sustain that? Ben Napper said at the pre-season get-together, the fan forum, that Norwich City should be a side always aiming for top six in the Championship, should always be aiming for promotion, if they're not in the Premier League. Well, at this moment in time, we are absolutely fighting for our lives, although we're not doing the fighting bit, for survival in the second tier, in the Championship. That is chronic failure from all departments. So this was always going to be a really difficult few weeks, because I expected this to be the case. I'm not inside Mark Atanasio's mind, but if I'm him, maybe he's seeing this as a trip to try and shake some sense into these individuals and try and see a reaction over the next 3 games and make it very real that their jobs are on the line and see how that goes. And if that doesn't work, then at least you've got 2-3 weeks of prep to try and find the replacements. Because yes, it is a big job in order to try and, if you're going to sack Manning and you're going to sack Napper and you're going to sack Webber, that's, first of all, an expensive thing to do, but you also need to replace them correctly, and that isn't an easy thing to do, and it's even more difficult when you're Mark Atanasio and you don't have a particularly extensive knowledge in the sport. So there's a lot to think about for him, and I suspect his mind is whirring. I appreciate the sense that they won't want to be reactive and they won't want to make decisions based on whim. My argument would be that we are a quarter of the way through the season and you've got a big enough sample size now that this isn't a reactive call. I think we've seen enough evidence to see that this won't change. I really, really hope, but I fear that the excuse for the underperformance is put down to injuries, and I really hope that that's not used, because one, it's our fault that we're getting this many injuries, because the conditioning of the players, the recruitment of the players has been incompetent and we can't keep them fit. And two, I actually don't think any of the players returning will make a sizable difference. Now, I like Mark Atanasio and I think he will come good. They have deep pockets. I think they care. That's certainly something I've never questioned. But we do need some leadership now, and we do need some big decisions. I suspect that this trip will be used to, as I say, shake some sense into these individuals, give them an ultimatum, say if this doesn't change, you're all gone, and also just buy a little bit of time to try and find what's next, because I don't think this is the future. But the real situation, the reality here is that we've got, 3 mightily important games, much like Bristol City, Derby and Swansea were. If we'd have sacked Manning post Ipswich, maybe we'd have picked something up in these very winnable games against teams, maybe not so much Bristol City, but certainly in Derby and Swansea, who will be around the relegation zone come the end of the year. We've already lost out now on those 3 games. Are we going to sacrifice the next 3 games for people to see sense? Hull is going to be a really toxic atmosphere. You've got protests planned. I suspect the attendances will be dropped. It's on the telly. We're in front of the nation. This could get mightily embarrassing. The owners won't be here, from my understanding. Let's hope. Let's hope for Liam Manning's sake it's a victory, because personally, from a man-to-man, I don't want to see anyone, get wheeled out and abused. That's not fair on anyone. And you could say, well, it's his doing. I don't take any enjoyment from seeing that type of behaviour. But when you don't feel listened to and change isn't being made and you don't feel like you're being on a journey, there is no other option. It's going to be an interesting week. Look, I'm going to have a chat with Connor Southwell, who'll provide some updates on the situation, his take on things. We'll have a reaction to the Atanasios on BBC Radio Norfolk. We'll have a podcast on Thursday reacting to the comments from the ownership, and then obviously preview and into the Hull game. So it's going to be a busy week. Stay locked into TNC. Thank you so much for your support on the recent content, and hopefully we will become united and we will see the change that we want to see at this football club, because this is not fun talking about Norwich City in the relegation zone of the Championship and looking at Hull, Sheffield Wednesday and Leicester upcoming and not expecting us to pick up any points. I don't take any pride in that. This is not fun to watch Norwich City continually lose games in the Championship. We need change. We need it soon. Let's come together and create that. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you all again very soon. Bye-bye.